This is the bit where we riff. So what should we riff about, Jack?
Watch any sports lately?
I watched football last night. The Carabao Cup. There was one penalty shootout. And stop me if you need me to explain what a penalty shootout. But a penalty shootout is where
under a rock.
They decide. I've
been here for.
They're drawing the game. They decide who wins. And Fulham were playing Fleetwood. Is that who they were playing? And they went through the whole team and they still hadn't decided it. And Fulham ended up losing 16-15 on penalties.
Wow, that's a big number, isn't it?
It may be a record, I don't know. What news stories mattered most this week in the world of media and advertising? I'm Omar Oakes, Editor-in-Chief of the Media Leader.
And I'm Jack Benjamin, reporter for the Media Leader.
Yes, you are. Welcome to the Media Leader podcast. This week we'll be discussing Radiocentre's latest tuning in events, a row between ITV and Isba, and product updates from Snap and Meta. We're going to get into all of that, but first, Jack, big publishing news. I'm going to you on this. You cover publishing platforms and so much else for us at the Media Leader. The big news we're tracking this week is The Guardian, which is in talks with Tortoise Media to buy The Observer. I've got lots of questions of that. Interestingly, it came out on the same day as Guardian Media Group's earnings. Before we get into that, give us the top lines. How is it doing in terms of ad revenue, overall revenue? Are they hiring more journalists? What's The Guardian doing?
Yeah, so Guardian Media Group posted a, unfortunately, double-digit drop in ad revenue in the latest results. That fell 13%. However, the overall health of Guardian's business is somewhat, better. Overall revenue fell by 2.5%. And digital reader revenue grew 8%, sort of leading that, even though print revenues are declining. Same story with a lot of publishers.
And so what's going on with The Guardian wise? I mean, 13% sounds like quite a lot. Big year-on-year drop in ad revenue. How does it explain that?
Yeah, so we asked The Guardian, a spokesperson told us that they've been navigating a significant ad market recession in both the UK and US. And they said that they were exposed to sectors which suffered disproportionate decline in spending with them. And it's really not necessarily specific to The Guardian. There is market decline. We've seen that at other publishers. Reach is the UK's largest publisher, and they've also posted an 11.5% decline in print ad revenues, in the first half of this year. So sort of relatively standard for the whole market. But it's also true that The Guardian has been hiring more journalists. They have been spending a little bit more money. That's true of both the UK and the US. They've been expanding their teams in both markets, wanting to provide more coverage, really, of areas that are underserved, perhaps, in their current coverage.
And in terms of that investment, so they've talked a lot in recent years about investing in the US. It looked to me, looking through the Scott Trust figures, that they'd hired net an additional 35, 40 extra journalists year on year, something like that. I mean, are they all kind of working in New York and California, or some of them in London, or any in London?
I'm not sure if anyone reporting on the US is based in London. I'd have to actually check. But most of those reporters are actually based around different parts of the country in the US. I mean, yeah, you have a lot of people in New York and DC, but also in more other local areas. When I've interviewed The Guardian's US editor previously, they've mentioned that they wanted to expand their investigations coverage across different areas that are maybe being underserved in the US market. They wanted to invest as well in coverage specifically on issues related to race and sustainability, really important topics for especially younger readers. So it's not surprising actually to see that they've added quite a few extra journalists. But of course, in the short term, you do see that show up on the finance sheet, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe their costs have maybe perhaps gone up. But in the long term, who knows? Maybe that pays off.
Yeah, it's interesting because stop me if I'm wrong, but these financial figures from The Guardian, they don't actually split out revenue between UK versus US. Or, they're also active in Australia, aren't they? But
that's right.
You would expect in a US presidential election year. I don't know if listeners will catch the Bill Maher real-time show. But he was saying that how great it was that Kamala Harris, her nomination, she's only having a 3-month campaign compared to the 2 years that these candidates seem to get. And he was making the point that the only reason they're so long, in his view, is because it just creates all this advertising opportunity that they can, the political contributions to media owners, essentially. Is The Guardian, what I'm getting at, is The Guardian going to benefit from this expanding US operation and get some of that monies
You know, I imagine there is part of that. You know, all news publishers got a bit of a Trump bump. That was a notable thing in like 2016, 2020, perhaps happening again in this election cycle. I think we'll know by the end of it. But also this Harris bump. Yeah, there's a lot of excitement being generated by these candidates. And this is obviously an extremely important election. And I think news organizations, not just The Guardian, but lots of UK news organizations have definitely expanded their coverage of US politics just because people in this country seem to be interested. And there's probably lots of money to be made, sure. But it should be noted that The Guardian's US output is not just political. There's lots of other stuff that they're covering, doing lots of original work. In fact, just from word of mouth, I've heard really positive things from Americans that I know that have started reading The Guardian more and more relative to actual US sources. And many of them don't actually know that The Guardian is a UK news brand. They just think it might be an American news brand because, of course, we're all US centric.
We're all, what was that Theresa May said? Global people are from nowhere, or something stupid like that. Well, let's talk about the Observer selling to Tortoise. I'm not sure. James Harding previously was the editor of the Times, previous BBC. I'm not. If you told me that he would be running the Observer one day, I'd think you were crazy. But here we are. So what do we know? The Guardian told staff on Tuesday. We're recording on Wednesday. They told staff yesterday. It's in talks to sell the Observer. They're talking about putting up £25 million new money in editorial and commercial teams over the next 5 years.
Yeah, so, Tortoises, yeah.
So £5 million a year. The Guardian's owned the Observer since 1993. Tortoise has been going for 5 years. What? If you were, why does this make sense? What's the strategy? So what Tortoise, they kind of started off with the whole slow news thing, market proposition. That's right. Zag or love a zig. They do podcasts, they do live events.
Newsletters are big as well.
Newsletters. Yeah. I mean, how what does this fit into their strategy, do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think you have a lot of new players that are digital first and digital focused that, because they're new brands. I mean, Tortoise actually, I think I would argue, has perhaps a strong brand among people that are interested in the type of news that they deliver, which is slow news, investigations, not really caring about the day-to-day.
Metropolitan, elite.
Yeah, a little bit.
You're getting at
well,
people like us.
I wouldn't pigeonhole the brand, but I don't know who their target audience is. To be fair, we might have to get them on an interview. It'd be really interesting to talk to James Harding. But yeah, I mean, from their perspective, the Observer's a really big brand name, old established brand name. They said they want to keep it running. It's sort of a diversification of what their news offering could be, and also the types of people that they might be reaching, I think, to your point. And also, I mean, it's a prestige thing, as with all of these sort of news outlets. To be able to own a really old paper, we're seeing lots of hands trading other papers around the UK, Telegraph being the most probably biggest name. That's about to happen later this month, probably, or next month. Spectator already bought by Sir Paul Marshall. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably a little bit of ego involved, of course, in any big newspaper purchase, even though the Observer, I don't know how much necessarily it would add in terms of like business value. If they could modernize the brand a little bit, it could be an interesting sort of aspect of the portfolio, but it's definitely a diversification play.
Anna Bateson, the CEO of Guardian Media Group, she's given the Observer the send-off already, the big send-off. Here's a quote: "This is an exciting strategic opportunity for the Guardian Media Group. It provides a chance to build the Observer's future position with a significant investment and allow the Guardian to focus on its growth strategy to be more global, more digital, and more reader-funded." Catherine Viner, editor-in-chief of the Guardian, said, "My number one priority is a future in which both titles continue to thrive and deliver high-quality journalism to our readers." Jack, what do we know about Tortoise? So that was strategy. What about where it's actually getting the money from? Who's it owned by?
So Tortoise reports that it's backed by a range of financial investors. That includes Thomson Reuters chairman David Thompson. There's no investor that has controlling interest, and we don't have a full look into Tortoise's finances. The most recent filing that I saw on Companies House actually showed that last January it received a £2 million investment. £2 million
nice.
investment.
Where'd that come from?
Not sure.
Not sure.
No. There wasn't a detail on exactly who made the investment included in that filing. The main founder, Harding and a few other directors that sort of lead Tortoise clearly have a large stake, and they're interested, it sounds like, from just word of mouth, in sort of creating the brand more than necessarily driving like immediate business results. I think they my understanding of Tortoise is, we really care about high quality news. We don't care how fastly it comes out. We're not worried about chasing traffic. We want to deliver, quality, even if it's 8,000 word long quality, people trusting our readership to actually engage with that content. So but I would love, as Ray Snoddy wrote in his column this week, we don't necessarily have a good enough look at the ownership structure of all of the major news publishers in this country. And I think that would probably be to the benefit of everyone if we knew exactly every single person that had a stake in news media.
And for The Guardian, I mean, I'm sure it long moved ago to a 7-day operation anyway. So in terms of The Observer, you must have had journalists who are working for The Guardian on other days and The Observer. Yeah. I mean, how much organisationally do you get a sense of is actually going to change? I know it's a big thing for the brand to go out the window, but in terms of what journalists are going to be doing there, what commercial people are going to be doing,
I think in some ways it simplifies things. I mean, that's probably part of the reason why The Guardian is looking for a seller in the first place, or at least considering an offer from Tortoise. I think a lot of people, even from a consumer standpoint, I mean, they might not even know that The Observer is owned by The Guardian, or if they do they, how much they care about the brand intertwining. There's also the internal structure of like, do you write for The Observer? Do you write for The Guardian? Can you do both? Are you selling only on The Observer, only on The Guardian? I mean, you can really simplify your corporate structure and focus primarily on the brand. And you sort of got that from what Anna Bates and Catherine Viner were saying in terms of it could, a sale could actually be positive for both brands. So I think that's kind of behind why The Guardian would even consider this in the first place, separate from the fact that, obviously The Guardian's always looking to grow its own business, and maybe it wants to shift investment into new territories like the US. And maybe it's easier to do that if you don't have to worry about this secondary brand that's popular in the UK.
So that was The Observer. Obviously, we'll follow that on themedialeader.co.uk for further developments on that, as well as analysis and opinion. You mentioned Ray Snoddy's column talking about the Jewish Chronicle this week and questions about its ownership as well. There were also many other stories going on, and I'll start off with some audio news. So we talked about stuff happening on yesterday. Radiocentre had their annual tuning in conference. They announced commercial radio revenues grew by 5% in the first half of this year. Jack, you went to this conference. What did you hear? What did you find that was interesting?
Yeah, well, that was actually probably the one really big piece of news was just the latest figures out of commercial radio. It's very healthy, continuing to grow. We'll get the latest RAJAR figures later this quarter to talk about. Otherwise, the event was, it's interesting. There was honestly a lot of overt selling to the advertisers and agencies in the room from the actual talent themselves that are presenters on lots of radio programs from Global and from Bauer. Heard from the folks at Capital Breakfast, and they were talking about how much they love working with brands, and like if they have a fun idea for something that they can, go to a brand and try and like have a stronger engagement. And basically, if you put money behind something, they can do more of what they might want to do. So it was, it was interesting. It was my first tuning in event that I'd personally attended. So it's always really good to check in on how the commercial radio industry is doing, get a feel for some of the talented individuals that are working there. But yeah, lots of selling the importance of commercial radio, as you'd expect. It's you know what, it's great, and it's great that whenever you go to an audio event like that, you get a lot of talent who just, you really do get the honest sense that they just love being on the radio. They love the radio business. Yeah. It just so happens I was at Global, around the corner from our office. I was at Global this morning, and the first meeting I had, it was on the same floor as Hart. Amanda Holden, I think she just finished her segment, she and Jamie Thinkston, and she was doing some sort of photo shoot, and she's just loving it. She's loving being in the office, and kind of like you tell other people, it does have that dynamic of a media organization when the commercial people, the marketing people are not separate
from the talent. You really do feel like there's this buzz, and I think that's really important for media organizations. You see that Bauer, their new office in Euston, they're really happy with that because their old place in Golden Square was kind of higgledy-piggledy, offices all over the place. So you'd never know that John Bon Jovi or whoever was coming in to do a thing interview on Absolute Radio, whereas their new setup, you kind of that's more central, and you really feel like you're a part of it. So great to have that celebration of radio, and I think a medium like that really does lend itself well to talent.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jamie Theakston, and should just know that he announced earlier this week that he was diagnosed with stage 1 laryngeal cancer.
Oh no, I didn't know. No.
Yeah, so we're wishing him well. Said the prognosis is very positive and hoping to be back in October. So until then, Jason King will actually be spending more time with Amanda Holden in the mornings.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So wishing him well. Omar, in TV news, one of the big stories that you reported earlier this week from a Thinkbox event, I believe, last week that you attended, is that ITV Managing Director of Commercial Kelly Williams warned advertisers over Isba's plans to launch Origin without Barb. What is the significance of this story? What did you learn from that event that you attended?
Yeah, so as regular listeners or readers of the Media Leader will know, I regard this Origin plan by Isba, the trade body for advertisers. Origin is this long in the making initiative to create a single platform where any advertiser can measure its the audience for its advertising across different mediums. So TV, outdoor, digital display. It does sound as ambitious as it sounds. And TV is obviously a big part of that. Now, Barb, which has been the UK TV audience company for the last 40 years, they can have quite strict restrictions over who uses their data and why. And they are not convinced of how Isba plans to use Barb data within Origin. Kelly Williams told this Thinkbox conference last week, and it's on the Media Leader. We published a story about it on Monday. Barb complies with MRC standards, which means that you have to see an ad for at least 2 seconds, as well as it being at least 50% in the screen. Right. And Isba is planning to have TV data in Origin that doesn't meet that threshold. So I'm very concerned about that. They're essentially worried that TV data, TV audiences are going to be on a par with YouTube data, where you're not quite sure about how much people are actually watching, skippable ads, are people paying attention, versus the high impact, high quality format of TV.
I mean, this has been the whole problem. It sounds like since Origin was announced, right? It seems like the TV operators are just worried this whole time that their medium is going to be undervalued in Origin in this way. And it sounds like it just keeps cropping up as a potential concern in various different ways, right? Yeah.
The broadcasters on background will have told you this over the last 2 or 3 years, that Origin has been on track to be developed. But this was quite a public intervention that he made at this conference, Kelly Williams. And, he was on a panel with his fellow broadcast counterparts, Varitza Djordjevic from Channel 4, Brett Dalmuda from Sky Media. Interestingly, also on the panel was Phil Chrysler from Amazon Ads.
Interesting.
Very much one to watch what's going on with Amazon Prime Video and advertising. But yeah, they endorsed what Kelly had said. So the latest we know about Origin, and I'll be speaking to Isba's Director General, Phil Smith, at the Future of Media next month, when they will have hoped to have launched the beta trial, which is essentially rolling out now, Project Origin. Their current plan, if they don't use Barb data, is to use an alternative panel, a smaller panel, 2,500 people compared to Barb's 7,000, but also by Kantar will do the measuring. And yeah, it's they're pressing ahead with or without Barb.
Wow. Okay. Well, bold move, bold strategy. We'll see if it plays out for him. I wanted to ask you as well about your column this week. So you went to another event, lots of events in September.
I'm all over the place.
I know. Same. It's just so why everyone does it in September.
It means that I miss you, Jack.
Oh, well, at least we get this podcast every week to check in. So you went to this conference called Who Cares. It was the first time inaugural Who Cares conference. Who attended? What was that all about? And what did you write about it?
So yeah, Who Cares was founded by Nick Manning, regular media leader columnist, and Brian Jacobs, another veteran of the industry, knows where all the bodies are buried, knows more about this industry than I ever will. And they've been talking for a long time about you can read it, if media leader readers, if you read Nick's column, you get this sense of where kind of a lot of the issues keep coming back as challenges for this industry, such as wastage, fraud, as Nick has written many times about, in his view, agencies not being honest brokers as much as they should be. So hence things like selling inventory media, not being super transparent about how they make their margins. So this Who Cares conference was essentially bringing these issues to light, and interestingly, getting a bunch of people together to form these industry working groups to come up with solutions for how to fix a lot of these problems. I unfortunately wasn't able to attend the whole thing. I was there in the earlier part of the conference. Really interesting presentation, which I talk about in my column this week, from Michael Farmer, who we've previously interviewed, the consultant who's author of Madison Avenue Manslaughter, has written a lot about how the business models of the holding companies are essentially broken, which is why they only essentially grow through acquisition. He was very clear that agencies need to be more consultants than servants, which I think is a good business strategy generally anyway, but it's not easy. It's much easier said than done. We're actually having the fortitude to say no to a client if what they're demanding of you is actually going to ruin your business in the long run. The issue is when you want to be a can-do person, you want to serve an account well, but you don't define a proper scope of work for how you're actually making money. You end up just constantly saying you'll do more for less. And it shouldn't be any surprise that, a media agency in particular might find clever ways of making margin in some other way if their revenue per head is going down. So really interesting. There's going to be lots more coming out of that conference as the videos are uploaded onto YouTube. But yeah, it was good to see so many talented people who actually want to make a difference and care about the future of this industry.
It's one thing to show up, but another thing to actually start instituting some changes as well. So we'll have to see if people take what was said in that room and then actually apply it.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm a journalist. I get to talk about things and not actually have to do anything. Some would say. Let's move on. In social media news, Meta is giving Instagram users under 18 users new teen accounts to put parents in greater control over their activities. Oh dear. This will include the ability to block children from using the app at night. Jack, why are Meta doing this? Do you think it'll be effective?
Well, Meta's, like all social media companies, under a lot of pressure to start addressing some of these issues around teen and child mental health. And certainly there's lots of concern from regulators that there's online harms. Social media companies have a responsibility to address this. So here's one example of basically giving parents a little bit more control or transparency over their kids' usage of their apps. And by default, if you're under 18, Instagram will not send you any notifications between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. to quote unquote promote sleep. So, I mean, it's crazy that we're at the point where social media is that addicting and for kids that they feel like they're not sleeping enough. But so Meta's trying to address that. Whether or not it will be effective, I think there's going to be limited effectiveness because you still haven't solved the problem of age verification in terms of so many people lying about their age. I think an Ovcom report suggested that around a third of kids were lying about their age on social media in order to be, above 18, and then they're therefore not necessarily, can get around these restrictions. So that problem really does need to be solved. But in the meantime, while they're working on maybe tech solutions for that, it's good to get the right policies in place. And so, I think we should probably give them a relatively small pat on the back for instituting these policy changes. And now they need to actually get the enforcement mechanisms in place to make them completely possible, as opposed to only possible for a subsection of teens and kids who are actually saying their birthdays are accurate when they sign up for accounts on those apps. Yeah, if you ask me, and I know you're not, but if you ask me,
this thing about blocking notifications between 10 and 7. If it's a teen account, it should be notifications blocked as default the whole time.
Well, certainly people can choose that. But yeah, I mean, look, there's loads of anecdotes about, you know, certain children and teens really abusing their time spent with social media. And look, it's good to see some social media companies definitely take a, you know, stricter stance on this. But yeah, I'm sure they'll be relooking at some of these policies. I mean, reconsidering. But to me, the age verification thing is a huge problem that doesn't have an easy solution. The solution, as you suggest, is to, you know, if someone's not, you know, spending too much time all the time, not just at night on social media, is to maybe block notifications. Fine, Meta can maybe look at tweaking those policies over time. But
well, you know, the problem,
or parents should just step in and just say no.
Well, we're part of the problem as well, and I mean the whole journalistic class of people that cover media, is because, you know, we can say things like, oh, you know, isn't it terrible that, you know, kids, teens, young people, they're addicted to social media because of, you know, the gamification, the tactics that gambling companies use, where you kind of send notifications and you keep people hooked.
Yeah, right.
But then when these companies release their quarterly earnings, we look at the engagement metrics, and we're like, ooh, engagement metrics went down for Instagram or whoever. But how are they going to keep their engagement metrics up unless they do stuff like this?
Well, I mean, this is the issue. I mean, we, especially, you know, business media, will report on what's important to, like, you know, not just Wall Street, but advertisers, investors, and what's important to them is eyeballs. So yeah, it is good for business to have people be addicted to your product, no doubt, but it's not good for society. And I think, you know, certainly once, you know, now that regulators are really taking a closer look at a lot of social media companies, it starts to become bad for business potentially. So they need to address it. And that's sort of that's the cycle that we're in. It's arguably just not going fast enough in terms of regulation taking a really long time to actually crack down, and then social media companies reacting to that. But over time, you know, hopefully things become a little bit better for children online, at least, you know, gradually. And then in other social media news, there was an annual partner summit this week from Snap, and they unveiled their 5th generation Spectacles smart glasses, as well as a number of new AI features for Snapchat. Omar, I wanted to ask, because you had mentioned, we were talking about this earlier, you've used Spectacles before. I have not. There's obviously an earlier generation. We haven't seen the new generation. Are they interesting to you? I mean, Meta has their own smart glasses as well that are with Ray-Ban. They look really nice. These new ones are still very bulky. I'm just curious what you think of this whole product line for Snap.
Yeah, I think I might have been, I was offered to use the 1st generation Snap Spectacles, and the battery didn't last very long. You know, it was very easy to take pictures and video with it, and this big light comes on to make, you know, other people aware that you're recording.
No stealth shots,
but they didn't look particularly great. So, you know, you really, to your point about Ray-Ban, you know, why the Meta thing is more interesting, because you want to have glasses that just aren't, you know, a video recording device. You want them to actually look good as well. It's supposed to be a fashion accessory. So the problem is I can't help thinking about Apple's, the AI stuff they were talking about in the phones launch last week, Apple Intelligence, and looking at a lot of the technology that you're going to have just on smartphones made by Apple and Google, and looking at these features and thinking, well, they're just going to be commoditized, and what is actually unique about what Snap is offering either on the phone app or Spectacles. I think it's going to be difficult. I think if you're Snap, you're really looking to be acquired by one of these companies if possible, where you want to be able to shape the future engineering of those products, other than just having a product which might be better. But as they've learned over so many years, you know, Snapchat has been targeted by, let's be honest, by Facebook, where a lot of product R&D has been, you know, copied. So it's so difficult. It's so difficult. And you have to hand it to Snapchat. They're doing a wonderful job innovating over the years, but Spectacles can be another of those things that you don't see that USP really shining through.
No, I suppose not yet, but you do have some clear developing demand for smart glasses, it sounds like. So hopefully the technology can be put to use in some, you know, obviously if Spectacles don't take off themselves, at least the tech probably won't be a completely useless endeavor to have research developed all that, right? I would hope.
I mean, is it really so difficult just to pull out your phone and take a video or something? I don't really understand the use case.
Well, yeah, I think it's a lot of people don't want to be, as to your point earlier, completely glued to their phone all the time, but do want the ability to record video, take pictures. Obviously, you can have your phone in your pocket, but yeah, I don't know. It's nice if they look nice and they offer that ability, and maybe have some other AI features where you can talk to an AI and receive information, a la Siri, which I don't think anyone really uses, but some people like must love. You could make an argument that it's fulfilling a niche use case. And who knows, maybe it becomes more popular, especially as a fashion accessory. You might have a little bit of that Apple effect where it's like, ooh, they've got the new spectacles, or they've got the new Meta Ray-Ban glasses. They look cool and they're like kind of high tech. I mean, it's all about branding to some degree to make tech become really popular. That's why the iPod did better than the Zune.
Well, go back to Steve Jobs' times. It's about educating market as well. Remember when the Apple Watch launched? You're like, well, why does anyone need that? Mm-hmm. And so they didn't do what Samsung had done and just rushed to market. Samsung was so obsessed with being first. They rushed to market with the Samsung Gear, I think their watch was called. And Apple just waited. They said they were going to do it. This is what it's going to be. And they didn't actually made it available to buy, I think, for several months afterwards. But during that time, they got celebrities to wear it. And they kind of communicated that the watch will be able to do this, the watch will be able to do that. And they built up that demand. And then even when they did launch it, they did limited release. I'd like,
and now it's a health device. I mean, primarily for a lot of people, like, these products develop in use case over time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, taking your time with when you're trying to educate market, I think sometimes you just need to take your time, but what do I know? Okay. I'm going to wrap up in a bit, but finally I want to get to new figures from View, the JCDecaux backed programmatic outdoor digital ad company. Nearly 1/3, 29% of UK ad campaigns over the last 18 months have used programmatic digital out of home, tied with the US and France for the highest rate of adoption globally. The company's now predicting that programmatic adoption will reach 36% within the next 18 months. Jack, why is this significant? What's driving the growth?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Programmatic only buys are in part driving the growth. There's a lot of advertisers that normally you would use programmatic digital out of home as part of a broader digital out of home campaign, and that's still popular. But increasingly, about 47% of digital out of home campaigns are now being bought only programmatically. And I think a lot of that is just sort of post-pandemic / during the pandemic, programmatic buying became just more popular. It's very easy. You can make use of more data. And just frankly, it's just easier for advertisers to buy programmatically. And that's part of the reason why it's true on digital that it's a lot of the programmatic buys instead of going direct to individual publishers. And so because of that sort of developing trend, it's become more popular in out of home as well. And yeah, you can you have more flexibility in how you're buying. You can do dynamic creative optimization, a little bit easier, especially if it's programmatic. So there's a variety of different things, but the important thing is that yes, it's a growing market, and the beneficiaries are not just out of home companies and the agencies that work with them, but also demand side platforms that are offering this capability. They're sort of poised to reap the benefits of this development.
Yeah, I remember in previous iterations of the report by View, they really put out punchy stuff about how, they used to say stuff like, oh, media agencies, they don't understand programmatic. We've done a survey. Marketers and agencies, they don't understand programmatic. And I don't think they do those things anymore. But they're definitely going back to the thing about educating market. They were definitely, they felt that there was just a lack of understanding about the opportunities of programmatic. But I think most big agencies have lots of people that understand the ecosystem now. I just think it comes down to a costs thing. And you mentioned about, the cheapness. Well, you're getting into dynamic creative optimization. You can start running up the costs pretty,
It's definitely true.
And, the more granular you want to target, the more expensive that can be as well. And we are talking about out of home. Someone I was at an out of home event yesterday, and I said outdoor. I referred to the sector as outdoor, and this guy scolded me. He's like, it's not outdoor, it's out of home, because we've got loads of inventory inside shopping centres, etc., etc. I was like, I know. I'm just old.
You've got to be very precise with your language.
I'm just old.
Yeah.
So, but my point is that it's a one-to-many medium. That's its superpower. And yeah, I know Minority Report's fun film and everything, but you don't really want that. Do you want to have brands who are making big statements to groups, big numbers of people, rather than...
But some of that can be dynamic, like in reaction to your team winning a game in a locality, right? I mean, there's interesting dynamic creative optimization that doesn't have to be so hyper-personalized. I agree that the Minority Report thing still creeps me out to this day. I think what's particularly interesting is, unlike other programmatic channels, out-of-home has a different measurement capacity. I mean, it's not so simple to, there's no last click attribution. No one's clicking on an out-of-home ad. So how you measure programmatic in the digital world more generally is very different from how it's measured in out-of-home. And I think that is something that out-of-home companies need to sort out, or measurement companies need to sort out, in order to further increase the use of programmatic digital out-of-home. Because for now, it's like, yeah, it's great, it's flexible, maybe it's cheaper, maybe it's not, depends on how you're doing it. But is it actually effective? Hard to measure. So I think that's something that they'll be need to work on over the next few years.
Yeah. CF discussion about origin. I love it when we geek out about measurement, because this is what really matters. And it's up to us to keep reminding people in the industry that measurement it matters so much to everything that's going on with wider issues in this industry. Wastage, fraud, lack of talent,
Don't waste your money.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to for so many businesses.
But anyway, I'm going to be respectful of the audience's time. Thank you for listening if you listened this far to the end. Thank you, Jack, so much for your continued hard work and intelligence covering the stories this week. And we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Omar. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader podcast. You can find and listen to all our episodes on our website at themedialeader.co.uk or wherever you get your podcasts. But just remember, please do subscribe to be notified when we release our next episode. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm editor Omar Oakes. Our executive producer is Jack Benjamin. See you next time.